Hello, welcome back. So I'm sitting in a car right now. It's actually a plug-in SUV. So if you've been watching videos about plug-in electric vehicles, you'll probably know that there aren't a lot of plug-in SUV options, even less, fully electric SUVs. The vehicle you're probably hearing the most about now, that there's the most excitement about, is the RAV4 Prime. And if you're like me, you've maybe already watched a bunch of videos online of people reviewing the car. It's going to be released in very limited quantities at first for this 2020 year, and then they're supposed to release more, next year, but still only about like 20,000 units, which is not very much, at least from what I've read. And so that's kind of the car that everyone's really excited about. The RAV4 is obviously a very popular car just on its own in its gasoline form, so to have a plug-in version, it's going to be really cool. There's also going to be the Ford Escape plug-in that's coming out. Also recently, I just heard about the Hyundai Tucson is also supposedly going to have a plug-in version for 2022, I think. So the car I'm sitting in now is none of those new cars I'm talking about. This is actually a car that's been around since 2013, I believe, is when it was first introduced. This is the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, that stands for plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And the car that I'm sitting in now is actually a car that we now own. So in the last video I did, I talked about our Leaf, which we owned for about 5 years, a little over. We actually sold that car. So anyway, that's what I'm driving now. I've had it for a few weeks, so I just want to talk about the car a little bit and also present it as a totally viable option for someone that maybe doesn't think they'll be able to get the RAV4 Prime, or just doesn't want to spend that kind of money on a brand new car. We bought this one used, and it might be a better investment if you're kind of budget conscious about buying a plug-in SUV. So yeah, real quick, just the backstory on this car is it's a 2018, and like I said before, the car can go about 20 miles. I'm rounding down. It's rated for 22 miles. In my experience, I'm lucky to get that. I think 20 is more realistic. And so just starting, since I'm already in the car, we'll just talk about the interior real quick. This is the base model, so everything you're going to see comes standard with this car, at least for 2018. I don't know what's changed for the newer model years. I think it's been very small changes. So it's a comfortable car to sit in, as people, they like SUVs because they, you have a little higher riding height, and I definitely feel that compared to, my Nissan Leaf, which rode a lot lower to the ground, as hatchbacks and sedans will do. So it's not a super big SUV. There's definitely much larger ones, but this definitely has that minimum feel of being an SUV, kind of feeling a little higher off the ground. Interior space is very good. The seat that I'm sitting in is comfortable. These are all leather seats. Car comes standard with leather seats. And there's even some really kind of premium materials throughout the interior. It's actually kind of a soft touch plastic here on the door, but then it's hard touch plastic at the bottom, but then it's a nice soft cushiony, kind of like faux leather, I assume, synthetic leather material that is in just the right spots. It's right where your arm would go and rest when you're driving. And that's the case all around the car, even for backseat passengers. So I'm actually kind of impressed at kind of a level of premium quality, I feel like. The steering wheel is also leather. I'm guessing that comes standard as well. And something else I like about the seats is that they are electric seats. They're adjusted by an electric motor, and so that's really nice to have as just a standard feature. Every car I've had before we got our Tesla always had manual adjustments, so I had to always reach down. You still have to reach down, but now I can just simply do adjustments just by rocking the switches down here. It's no longer a manual kind of clunky adjustment like my Leaf had. Moving on from that, I think behind the steering wheel, you'll notice some shifter paddles here. I think that's what they're called, and gasoline cars have these, but they're for different reasons. They're somehow associated with shifting, and I don't know what their purpose is in a gasoline vehicle, but they're starting to pop up in electric cars. I think the RAV4 Prime will have these as well. But what they do in an battery electric plug-in is they adjust the regenerative braking. And so you've got one on the left and the right, and you can toggle. In this car, it starts kind of in a neutral position. So there's 5 levels of regen in this car, starting from 0 going to 5. 0 being nothing, I guess, the car just coasts. But as you gradually increase the regen, then the car starts to slow itself, thus, not only slowing the car, but putting energy back into the battery. So I usually crank it up all the way to 5. Moving back from behind the shifters now, let's just go straight to the gauge cluster behind the steering wheel. And so this is the area that you're going to get most of your driving information while you are in motion, and it looks traditional in some ways and is different in others. So you can see, starting on the right, we have a pretty standard speedometer dial over there, and then on the left we have something that looks similar. In a gas car, this would probably be the RPM gauge, and there is actually a gas version of the Outlander, so I imagine it probably just has a typical RPM dial on the left. What we have here for the PHEV, though, is it still shows you how much power you're using, but it's not strictly about RPMs. You can see that it's kind of color-coded. So if we start with the green, it's labeled Eco. That's kind of like where your battery will be happy. As long as you have a charge, it's not going to engage the gasoline engine. Well, once you start to go into this white part labeled power, then that's where you're using a lot of energy, and it might actually trigger the gas engine automatically to come on. Now I say automatically because we are in normal mode if you look right here, and that's the standard mode that the car will start in every time you turn it on. Now the blue part over on the left that says charge has to do with the regenerative braking that we just talked about. Whenever the needle dips into the blue, then that's showing that you're regenerating energy. So when you come to a stop or just slowing down and the regen is on, it's going to go into the blue section and you'll be sending energy back into the battery. Now moving into the center part of the display here is where we get our kind of our battery info and gas and kind of our range, basically, is what we're looking at here. So at the top it says 13 miles. That's how many miles that I can still drive on electric. At least that's what the car is telling me, but you can also tell by you can also see how much of a charge there is in the battery there, and so you can tell that we're about halfway. So for a car that's rated for 22 miles and a charge that appears to be at about 50%, 13 miles left is still pretty good. When I started my drive this morning, my odometer had, I guess, about 10 miles less on it. So I think when I booted up the car in the morning, it said I had 24 miles on a full charge, and I believe the odometer was at 17,431. And so I've already done some driving today, took my daughter to the doctor's, and also got the car washed in preparation for this video, and dropped her off at the grandparents and came back home. So that's why we have half a charge. I'm not starting out this way. Normally every day I start with 100%. So I've driven 10 miles so far. It says I have 13 miles left. Then you can see below below the battery range indicator is it says 66 miles, and interestingly, it's not just the gas. They don't separate them by battery and gas. It's like battery on top, and then it seems to be battery plus gas combined. So as my miles of electricity go down, the total miles will go down too. So for example, if it drops to 12 miles electric, then that total miles of 66 will also drop to 65. Kind of weird. I guess they're just saving you the time of having to do the math. But that's how it's read out. Everything else is pretty typical. We can see our battery gauge here at the bottom, and then the fuel gauge on the right. I always keep the fuel low because I don't want to be carrying around the weight of many gallons of gasoline when I don't have to, because I generally don't dig into the gasoline on a daily basis. And then you can see the odometer and the outside temperature. Now the reason that they also show you, it seems like a duplication to show you both, your battery level and your gas tank. But that's because you can change the display here in a few different ways. And I will point out that the button to do that, it took me seriously, it wasn't until the second day we owned this car that I found out how to change this display. It was set to something else, and I saw pictures online and was like, hey, how are people getting it to show like it's showing now? I wanted to see the battery, and I wanted to see the gas. And man, the button is, if you're sitting here, it really is not in a spot. I was going to the menu over here and trying to find it, digging deep in there. It turns out it's back here behind this little hidden button back here. This is the guy you want. to change your display up here on the main cluster. So I'm just going to go through those real quick so you can see what it changes to. So this is telling me how much, electric versus gas driving I'm doing. Once the gas engine kicks in, it'll start to tell me my MPGs, and gives you kind of like a combinated score of how much, between the electric driving and the gas. So far I've been 100% electric today, which is good. This is an interesting layout, and this is something that'll be duplicated on the main screen that I'll show you here in just a little bit. But it's nice to have a visualization of it here too. Basically, we're seeing, it'll show you the flow of energy. So here we have the gas engine, the batteries over here, and these are the tires. And so if I was driving, you would see an arrow kind of flowing from one to the other. So if I'm driving on battery electric, there'd be an arrow from the battery to the tires. If I decide to switch to gasoline or have to for some reason, and I'm kind of driving in hybrid mode, then it'll show the gas will suddenly have an arrow that goes to the battery, and then the battery goes to the tire. And so it kind of works as a hybrid that way. If you're really demanding power from the car, then an arrow will come from the gas, not only to the battery, but also directly to the wheels. So sometimes, it's a hybrid sometimes, it's a pure electric sometimes. The car just kind of figures it out on its own, although you do have some controls over it. And I'll show you that once we get kind of to the center console area. Anyway, this just visualizes the flow of energy, so you always know if the gas has kicked on for any reason. This is a little efficiency score. It's got leaves, and the more efficiently you drive, the more leaves it gives you. So you kind of have a score when you park the car. So when I parked this morning, I think I had 3 leaves out of 5. The most I've ever seen this give me is 4. And I drive really efficiently, so it must be really tough to get all 5 leaves to turn green. This is a 4-wheel drive thing. I haven't actually used this mode yet, but I'm imagining maybe that these are quadrants of the tires, and maybe they'll illuminate to show which tires are actively being controlled in this all-wheel drive configuration. I'm not sure, I haven't used that. I guess this just tells me when my next service should be. You can do a bunch of settings in here. I haven't really dug into it yet. Trip A, trip B, and back to where we started. So now let's move on to this part of the car. So this screen, let me set it back to home. Okay. It's a little dated. It's a little small. I imagine this is maybe like, I don't know, a 7-inch screen. And so it's not the most up-to-date, despite this being a 2018 car. Our 2017 Volt had a better screen and better touch response too. It's not bad, but it's not the best. It really seems a little bit behind where it should be. And I don't think they've really even updated the screen that much for 2019 and 2020 models either. So Mitsubishi's kind of lagging here as far as the screen quality, but it works just fine. You can move either by pressing the buttons like that, so like just a little bit of lag, not too bad though. Or you can also swipe it, so whichever you prefer. It's pretty responsive. I mean, I don't mind it, but I know some people are more critical of screens, especially as they get better and better. So yeah, you can select most of the controls you need from here. Controls for the music and things like that. So we've got our standard FM, AM. As you can see, we don't even have our phone set up for Bluetooth yet, even though we've had this car for weeks. We need to do that so we can take calls in the car. I kind of passed that here, so let me just go back real quick. The left side of the steering wheel does have, Bluetooth calls, that kind of stuff. You can control your volume and things from here. And then on the right is the cruise control. We've never taken the car on the highway or for trips much, so I haven't messed with the cruise control, but pretty typical configuration as far as audio controls on the left, as well as answering a phone call if you get one while you're driving, and cruise control on the right. So back to the screen. The main things that I use are Sirius XM, which I think is what I was on when we started. Can always go back to home. These buttons are always here. So the ones that I use primarily, so we already looked at the main screen, and this middle part is the only other one that I really use. And because we're dealing with the plug-in version of this car, let's quickly go to the PHEV vehicle information. This car shows you all sorts of information, more than I even need to know, really. But if you like having all sorts of information about the energy in the battery, I think this car has lots of ways to illustrate that. This is the main one that I go to. And so this kind of duplicates what we saw on the dash cluster. It shows you more visually, how much battery you have. You can see all the bars here. And then again, once the car is in motion, some arrows will go from the engine block to the battery, and then showing arrows from the battery going to the tires. I really don't go into this much. Like, I don't even know what this is telling me. 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour. It's telling me is my efficiency. I really find that doubtful because the battery in this car is a 12 kilowatt hour battery for this model year. They have increased it for the most recent model year, at least in Europe, and I think for 2021 that larger battery will come to the States. Anyway, if we're dealing with the 12 kilowatt hour battery, then 3.7 miles, let's just make the math easy for my sake. 3 miles a kilowatt hour would mean we're getting 36 miles per charge, which we're definitely not. And I doubt that the full 12 kilowatt hours of the battery is usable. So let's round it down even further and say really only 10 kilowatt hours of the battery is useful. And if it's going like 20 miles, if it's good for 20 miles of electric driving, then that's really only like 2 miles per kilowatt hour. So I don't really trust that information. I think it's really giving itself a lot more credit than it probably deserves. Anyway, that's enough about the screen. It's not great, but it does what you need it to do. Down here, man, my car looks dusty in all this sun. Just typical stuff and controls. You can see I don't have the AC on now. It feels cool right now, but it'll definitely be warmer later today, so I might have to turn that on, and then my electric range is going to take a hit, and we'll see how much when we go for a drive here in a bit. Just really typical stuff here, all your AC things, nothing too interesting. Down here, 2 cup holders. I've got like a cell phone holder adapter into one of them. Even underneath here, I guess, take a look at, you got your 12 volt adapter there. I'm not sure what this does. It has to do with the lift gate. I should maybe investigate that. I'm sure there's a lot more options available on the GT trim of this car. There's just 2 trims. So again, this is the base model, and the one above probably has some more features that these buttons would actually control. This little slot here is kind of weird. It seems to fit, like, you can put your key in there. I don't know if it's like to store it or what. Speaking of the key fob, we can just take a look at that real quick. Pretty rugged fob, so you got lock, unlock, and then the power lift gate here. This little button on the side is for the charging timer if you want to schedule your car to charge at a certain time. You know what? I should probably show that. Let's do that real quick. That was one more thing that I forgot to show. If we go here, time charging, I do generally have my timer set. And you can do several different, if you really have a reason to charge your car different times of the day, on different days, you have that ability. I just have it set, you can see here, Monday through Sunday. Every day it's going to charge from 10:30 at night to 6 in the morning, giving me a total of 7.5 hours, which is usually enough to get the battery to 100% full, especially if I have a little bit of a charge left. It'll probably take more like 8 hours and maybe a little more to get 100% charge. So if you have this off, it'll just charge as soon as you plug it in. But if you want to take advantage of lower cost electricity at night, that's what this scheduling is for. So anyway, I think that's maybe where the key goes. And again, this button disables that charger that I just showed you. It's a nice rugged looking key fob. I don't know what that is on there, but in comparison to, our Tesla one, which has a little, it's like a gloss black Looks like it gets scratched up real easy, get fingerprints on it, and that's why we have this little pouch for it to keep it safe. But this is a rugged looking little thing, so I like it. It goes along with the vehicle being a rugged, kind of like all-wheel drive vehicle. Last thing to show, I would say, on the interior, or at least up front here, is down here. We got our shifter, kind of unusual looking shifter. It's kind of like this light plastic. It feels kind of cheap, but you know, you shift. You can see the image down here. You shift left and down for drive, left and up for reverse. My Leaf was kind of like this, so a very familiar type pattern. Now, some people will take a few seconds to figure out where the park button is. Again, kind of a strangely placed button. It's right here. So it's behind, I mean, it's in front of, but as the driver, it's behind and kind of concealed by the shifter itself. So the second kind of oddly placed button in this car, in my opinion. Down here we've got, now these are important buttons. This is where the power of the plug-in version of this vehicle lies, and all these buttons here. So you have this charge button. I never press this. The idea is that you press this button and the gas engine will charge the battery. So if for some reason I want my battery to be charged higher so I can drive electric later, it can be pressed and it'll do that. So the gas engine will power the car driving and also send energy to the battery to charge it. I don't get that. That seems like an inefficient way to drive. Save is the button I hit all the time. So if I know I'm going to be driving more than the 20 miles that I can on battery electric, or if I'm going on the highway, which would be like a really inefficient speed to be going on electricity, and I'd rather have the gas engine, you know, working to take me on the highway, then I hit the save button and it'll kind of preserve your battery where it's at. It uses it a little bit still, but the gas engine will always kind of send a little more energy back to it to preserve the level. So yeah, charge and save. I don't ever recommend using charge, save. I use it all the time. Here's our parking brake, which is engaged. I guess maybe if I hit this button, it would always engage it when I park. I don't know. I've never tried it. This is the four-wheel drive lock, I guess. I've never used this. Haven't taken the car in an off-road situation, but I suppose pressing that button will engage the all-wheel control system. And the EV button will tell the car to drive in electric only, but it already defaults to electric, even when you're in normal, you know, which is how the car defaults when you turn it on. So I'm not sure what the EV button does, unless for some reason your gas engine is kicking in. You can hit EV and I guess it'll prevent it from doing that. Then we have seat warmers, just for the front. Haven't had to use that. We live in Texas, so don't plan to use that very often. Maybe just a little bit in the fall and winter time, maybe. And so that's pretty much for the controls of the car. It's got a decent size center console, nothing special. There's some USBs in there. The sunroof is really nice to have. When I first test drove this car, when it was new in 2018, we did consider it and test drove it. And I don't remember there being a sunroof on the base SEL model. I don't know how we wound up with one in this car. It was one of the reasons when I saw it for sale, I thought, oh wow, I want that because it has the sunroof and it's the cheaper base model. Yeah, you can open and close, so it's like a sunroof and a moonroof. And so you got the little sliding shade. It's got 3 buttons up here, open, close, and vent. So you can vent the heat out. I'm just going to open it again because it is starting to get warm in here. And that's it pretty much for the cabin space up front. How about we'll go outside the vehicle now. I'll give you a peek in the back and the trunk, and then we'll take this thing for a drive. Okay, so here we have the car from the outside. We have the white color, which I think goes really well with the chrome trim. There's a lot of chrome on the car, and in different colors, the chrome kind of stands out a little too much in my opinion. So I think on the white it blends in pretty well. You can see we still got the dealer plates on it. It's that new. Again, we've had it for maybe 3 weeks or so, waiting for our plates to come in and registration and all that. So yeah, I think it has a pretty aggressive stance from the front. I like how it looks. The newer models essentially look the same. Something I will point out, the tires. I really like these rims, and one of the reasons I was looking specifically for 2018 is that I like these rims a lot better than the newer ones have. To me, they look cooler, they're more aggressive, and the newer ones are just this, they're all silver and they're kind of like, they have all these spokes. It's just, it's not very, I don't know, I just don't like the look of them. I don't know how else to say it. So 2019 and 2020 models come with those. 2018, and I don't know how much older, have these older ones, and I like them a lot more. We get our plug-in hybrid badging. These windows will actually close, fold in if you want them to. If I grab the key fob real quick, I can do that. Point out real quick these floor mats that I put in from a company called Tuscon. I did that pretty quickly when we got the car. This car came with really flimsy floor mats initially. So got these, had never purchased from Tuscon before. WeatherTech is probably the most popular brand of floor mats in the States at least. But these ones go really high up. Like I was even able to tuck it under here. It just offers a lot of coverage. I really liked it. So I don't know if the WeatherTech ones do as much. And these were just a little bit cheaper. So I have nothing against WeatherTech, but I gave these Tux mats a try. Another thing, it's a small thing, I kind of think that the texture on these matches the texture on the plastic, and also just these kind of rectangular and square shapes kind of, to me, complement, you know, you get on the doors, it looks better over here. So, you know, that and that. Might just be my OCD. Anyway, these are nice, you know, nice floor mats. I like them. Just typical stuff. Glove compartment. It actually has a shelf that you can miss easily if you're looking from a high angle. So there is a shelf. That's where we keep the manual. Cup holder, just standard space down here. You can see we have masks. We have a lot of masks spread out throughout the car. So here's where, if I want to lock the car, the mirrors will fold, which is a nice feature. Let's go into the trunk. Again, if I use the, I think you hit it twice. You know, I've had an issue with this. Maybe someone can help me figure it out. So the car's locked, so maybe I have to unlock the car and then try. There we go. So, good amount of space in the back. Also added a mat back here. This is from a different company called Traval, I don't know. It's kind of a flimsy material, mat, but I like that because there's a floor underneath here. So I like that it folds easily to get under here. It's a little storage area here. This is initially where they put the charger, and it seems like the 12-volt battery is back here, which is interesting, in this section here, instead of in the front, where it would normally be. And then it's got these little deep pockets on the side. So it's a flat floor, which we like, but then you kind of have these deeper pockets over here. Not sure what that is. They do have these kind of tie-down switches. Switches? No. That's not the word I'm trying to use. These little levers, maybe, for tying down. There's 4 of them. So 2 more in the corners, in case you need to tie anything down for any reason. I don't know. Also got this privacy shade that folds out. And if you notice these cup holders back here, you might think that's a strange place. Cup holders behind the back seat. It's because the Outlander in its gas version comes in a 3-row option. So this is where the 3rd row would go, which would really not leave much trunk space. So I'm glad we have the trunk space for this plug-in version. The batteries go under the floor here, I'm sure, which is why there's no space for a 3rd row. So that explains these cup holders in the back. Also got another 12-volt outlet. In the GT model, this actually turns into like a normal plug where you could power something like a coffee maker or something on a camping trip. So if that's worth it to you, you got to upgrade to the GT trim to get that. And I've got a button on here also to control. You know, I completely passed the charge port on the other side. So let's go back into that. It's kind of a major component of the car, don't you think? Just press it, release it, and then we get these 2 chargers, which are kind of wet because it was cold this morning. It's quickly becoming not cold. So yeah, you get 2 types of chargers here. This is the standard one that we use with the charger that comes with the car. You can use it at public stations as well. This is the fast charge port. It's called CHAdeMO. It's kind of confusing. My Leaf had this, and I never really used it. I don't plan to use it on this car either, but it's interesting and I guess nice that they offer it as an option. This can fill up the car from like 0% to 80 in like 25 minutes, which seems like a long time to wait just to get 20 miles of range. So cool that they offer it, but you know, I just stick with this one for home charging and for public level 2 chargers. And so this is the gas cap on the left side. Don't have to use that one nearly as much, which is nice. So like I said, in the back we still get the really nice soft touch material. So even passengers in the back seat can enjoy that. We got those floor mats here again. They travel all the way across and cover this little hump here. So it's not a completely flat floor, but not as bad as my Leaf was. Also not as flat though as a Tesla and other electric cars are. So kind of in between. I'll link to these mats, by the way. The WeatherTech mats do the exact same thing. They still cover that whole area. I think these ones really go up like under there. Like they really cover a lot of space. So that's kind of the reason I went with them. And again, because I think they match better. Car seat back here. So kind of obscuring, you know, some of the seats. Something cool about the seats though is that they can recline. So you can raise them or lower them. I can't actually move them now because of the car seat, which is blocking it. But you know, you can see the little lever on the back of that one too. It'll actually let the seats move forward or backward a little bit. They're actually set at their full recline position, which I think is the most comfortable because the headroom is a little invaded by the presence of the sunroof. So if you get the sunroof, you can see it comes down, you know, a couple inches. Without the sunroof, you have a little more headroom back here. So we can also take a look under the trunk. Some people like to see that kind of stuff. If I can get it with one hand, there we go. It's very clean. They either cleaned it up really well at the dealership or the person who drove this before just, you know, was really kind. The battery, or the engine rather, it's kind of half and half. So you can see the EV part over here, gas part over here. And maybe that's why there's no room for the 12-volt battery under the hood, because it's occupied by that electric motor up here, which you can see all the orange cabling is for. All right, well, that's pretty much the exterior of the car. I can take this thing for a drive and give you guys my impressions of the ride quality. Okay, so it's mid-afternoon now. I'd already done half my driving this morning, and I'm about to do the rest of my driving for the day and see, how much range we're actually able to get just on the electric, battery propulsion from the car. So it's quite a bit warmer. First thing I'm going to do is say what I've got on my dash indicator here. We already used 10 miles, or we drove 10 miles, and it's saying that I have 11 miles left to go. Now I need to turn the AC on because it's hot, so I'm going to do that and see what happens. So let's start there. And it immediately drops from 11 miles to 9 miles just by turning on the AC, which I have set to 70, now 74 degrees. So this is just a realistic, depiction of what it would be like. Most people drive with the climate control on, especially in the South where I am. So let's just get moving. I've got to make a stop at the post office. Then I'm going to go pick up my daughter, and let's see how much range we have at the end of it. I kind of feel like we're probably not going to make it all the way on battery power, but I'll keep track, and we will update once the gas engine kicks in. So here we go. Saying hello to my neighbor there. Got some nice neighbors in this neighborhood. Really like it. We've moved a couple times in the past 4 years or so. All right, so first thing I have to do in driving, I mentioned this earlier, is it's starting me off in a very neutral kind of region. So I'm going to move it up using the paddle shifter to 5. It doesn't bring you to a complete stop. So I just now put my foot on the brake pedal. So unlike a Tesla and some other cars, the Chevy Bolt EV, probably the strongest regen in a car I've experienced was the Bolt. The Outlander's not going to come to a complete stop, but it is pretty strong regen, I would say. And compared to the Nissan Leaf we had, the 2015 Leaf that we replaced with this car, it is substantially stronger than that, I would say. I mentioned in my last video that the regen on the Leaf was pretty weak, so I'd say the Outlander is a step up from that for sure. And you just have more controls, more settings based on how strong you want it to be. So we've already dropped down to 8 miles. Again, this is partially because the AC is on, and really we're approaching 11 miles traveled since the battery was full this morning. So what else can I talk about? The comfort, I talked about the seat already. It's a comfortable seat. The drive itself, it's a very sturdy feeling suspension. I kind of associate that with like a luxury vehicle. This is not a luxury vehicle. I'm not trying to say that, but as far as how it feels, it's very planted on the road. And maybe that's just an SUV thing. I've never owned an SUV before, gas or plug-in. So this is a new kind of driving dynamic for me. And again, because we've only had the car a few weeks, it feels different to me, but I like the feeling. And I've been in other friends' cars. This kind of feels like a friend of mine's Lexus SUV. So again, not trying to say that the Outlander is anywhere near, the luxury level of a Lexus, but as far as how it feels driving it, it kind of has that really firm suspension, which I kind of like. Again, the regen, I'm almost coming to a stop, and just at the end here, I'm putting on my brake pedal. It reminds me to think that I need to get my wife to drive behind me and tell me if the brake lights come on, like if the brake lights are triggered by the regen. All electric cars need to do this now, but the Leaf didn't do this either, and I wouldn't be surprised if this Outlander doesn't, is that when the regen is strong enough to bring the car, to almost a stop, it needs to trigger those brake lights, and a lot of cars seem to not do that. So the Leaf didn't do that, and I need to confirm whether or not the Outlander does it. because just back there at that light, you know, there was no one behind me, but if there was, I don't think they appreciate, you know, me very clearly slowing down, but they're not getting that indication from my brake lights turning on. We're down to 6 miles now, by the way. I think I'm just going to wait, you know, we get to the end, and I'll see where the odometer is once the gas engine kicks in. But again, just addressing how the ride quality and the comfort, it's good. My Leaf was a really cozy car. I've always compared things to those Leaf seats. Not that they were the best seats ever, but they were really comfortable. Better than our Chevrolet Volt seats, and probably the worst seats I've ever been in were a Chevrolet Bolt EV. They're very narrow and thin kind of seats. So these seats, I would say, are quite comfortable. The padding and the cushioning feels good. The one thing it's maybe missing is lumbar support. I'm not getting that support at the bottom of the back of the seat. Now, this car is not intended to drive very far. Again, I try to drive it as much as I can just on the battery power. And so the trick with this car, it's not a trick, but I mean, if you're going to buy a car like this, you better be plugging it in. And otherwise, you're going to lose the benefits of having a plug-in in the first place. And in the case of this car, once it moves to the gas engine, or kind of the hybrid mode that it turns into once you're out of a full charge, the gas economy is not very good. And I knew that going into this. I knew that it was rated for like 25 miles per gallon or something like that, which in my opinion is not very good. And I can confirm that that was about right. So I have done a long journey in this car. I bought it at a dealership that was over 300 miles away, and I used the save mode that we talked about earlier, you know, because they were kind enough to send me off from the dealership with a full charge, and I didn't want to blow all my electric, you know, driving on the highway where it would dissipate much faster. So, you know, I maybe drove a couple miles, got on the freeway, put it into save mode, and then the car kind of works as a hybrid where it's kind of borrowing from the battery as needed and switching back and forth between the gas engine and the battery power. And so over those 300 miles, the car calculated, you know, the fuel economy for me. And, you know, it started really high, and then it just slowly kept going down, you know, the more gas that I used. And I used almost a full tank going from, you know, it was a 306-mile journey, something like that. And I think this gas tank, the gas plus the battery, can go like maybe 350 miles or something like that. And at the end of the trip, it told me that my average fuel economy was 27 miles per gallon. So beating the EPA rating, I think, but not by much. And anything below 30 to me is kind of unacceptable to this point. I'm at my first stop here, so we're probably going to cut the video. But, you know, to compare this to our Chevrolet Volt, which operated very similarly, it had a much higher, you know, electric range. But once it went to gas, it still was getting like close to 40 miles per gallon. I wish, and maybe there's a difference obviously between SUV and a sedan or a hatchback like the Volt, but you know, I wish that the gas mileage was better in this car. So because it's in the 20s, 26, 27 miles per gallon, it really encourages me to plug in the car every time I can. You know, you charge it every night and make sure that you're using the electric battery as much as possible so that you're not digging into the gas, and that's how you end up saving money. All right, so I'm going to do what I need to do here, and I'll update you on the battery power and how far we've gone on this journey. I have 6 miles being estimated right now, and probably about, I don't know, 40% of the battery, it looks like to me. So, okay, just dropped something off at the post office and going to pick up my daughter, and we'll see how much of it we can make just on the battery. So right now I'm seeing 2 miles being indicated. So it's still been 100% electric so far. Just waiting for cars behind me. so I can back out. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to make it all the way. And that's all right. I mean, that's kind of the idea behind these plug-in or PHEV vehicles is that, you know, especially if you're interested in electric vehicles but are maybe hesitant to go full electric out the gate and still want to kind of have that safety buffer that gasoline offers, then I think these are really good options. We already had a car like that with our 2017 Chevy Volt. That car had a lot more range comparatively, to this. We're getting, I'm hoping I can make it to even 20 miles, I'd be happy to make today with just the battery. The Volt, the second generation Volt got a big battery boost and, was able to go over 50 miles. There were some times that I got an indication of over 60 miles in that car. So this car, the biggest weakness is that it just doesn't have the range that the best plugins offer. And the reason people will, again, the whole point of this video is to kind of compare it or contrast it to the RAV4 Prime that's coming out, which offers, almost 40 miles. So like, almost double what this car can do. But again, the RAV4 Prime is going to be a brand new car. It's going to be expensive. I think in the highest trim of the RAV4, it's going to be like $50,000 maybe with everything, with all the options. This car is actually pretty expensive too. To buy it new, I think even the base model, like this model, is in the high 30s, like $36,000 or $37,000, which to me is too expensive. And I think that's why we didn't buy it when this model was new in 2018. It just didn't seem like a good investment at the time. So 2019 and 2020 models seem to follow that same pricing structure. And if you go to the next tier up, the GT, which adds some features but not a lot, and the battery is still the same, it goes over $40,000. So it really just comes down to your budget. This car brand new will be cheaper than, the RAV4, but that range, it's really, that's something that I'm hoping Mitsubishi will address soon. They already have a slightly larger battery pack for the overseas market, from what I understand. It's not offered here in the USA yet. I believe it will be in 2021, so it'll be a slightly larger battery. I will point out right now that the miles just went away, so now it's like 3 dashes. But I'm still on electric, I can feel it. So I'm gonna change my dashboard layout to what I showed at the beginning, near the beginning of this video, where I can see where the power is going. So I'll let you know as soon as it switches over to gas. But so far, we've gone 19 miles on 100% electricity, which I think is still pretty good. And I chose to record today because I am driving a little more than I normally would. So normally on a day-to-day basis, and again, because so many people are working from home right now, we are driving a lot less, and that's probably why. But since we've owned the car, we're usually able to get all our driving needs on a day-to-day basis done within those 20 miles of electric range that this car offers. And we have to plug it in, every night though. And I'm very diligent about that. It doesn't bother me at all. We have our charger at home kind of set up to where the charger's inside, but we don't park this car in the garage. We park our Tesla in there, and there is space for a second car, but we turned it into a workout area. So the charger is inside, and then I have kind of an extension cable that extends how far the charge cord can reach, and then just plug that in to the car when it's parked in the driveway. So it's just as simple as getting home, plugging it in, and because I have the timer set, it doesn't begin charging immediately. So even though I get home now, it's going to be late afternoon, I don't want it to charge then, because electricity is more expensive now. These are kind of peak hours because everyone's coming home from work. And so yeah, it won't actually start charging until later tonight. So we've gone 20 miles at this point. And again, the indicator's not showing any range, but I can tell that we're still on battery power. I expect that the gas engine will kick on any moment, but we made it 20 miles, which again is kind of what I expect to get out of this car. But you really got to baby it. I'm a really conservative driver as far as, you know, my foot on the accelerator pedal. And I've kind of trained myself to be that way just from driving electric cars for the past, you know, 5 years. My wife, on the other hand, is someone that doesn't want to think about that. She just wants to drive how she wants to drive. And, you know, when she's driving the car, she's not able to achieve as much range as I'm able to. So that's something else to take into consideration. You do have to treat this car a little bit differently. The gas just kicked on, and we had just crossed 21 miles. So I'll give it 21 miles, let's say we were able to go. And now what's happening is we're in a hybrid mode where the gas engine is assisting the battery. It's basically charging the battery, and then the battery is what's powering the electric motors, you know, the wheels through the electric motor. As far as I understand it, that seems to be how it works. So that should really be all I need to talk about. We're just trying to get to see how long the battery was going to last. And so there you have it. 21 miles in city driving. Again, if you were getting on the highway or doing any type of travel at higher speeds, that's where the save mode comes in handy, and you can reserve your battery power and use the gas engine when it's most efficient, which is at higher speeds, and save the battery for later when you're back off in the highway and doing like slower speeds around town. So I almost was able to complete. I probably still have 3 more miles to go. So when you think about, you know, how much of your daily driving is being covered with electric, it's still very impressive even with a car like this that doesn't offer a whole lot of electric range. So again, I would heavily you know, encourage you to consider a car like this. In fact, this specific car, because for a while there it was a very special niche kind of vehicle. It was the only affordable, I will say, affordable plug-in SUV for quite a while there, from 2013 until about now, where we're starting to see some new plug-in SUVs show up. There have been some plug-in Volvos, some plug-in BMWs that really offer even less range. I think they do like 14 or 15 miles, and again, they're very expensive cars. So I think the Outlander, you know, really did stand out for a long while there, and unfortunately they're about to get surpassed by people like Toyota. So I'm hoping in the next year or two we get a refreshed Outlander, but for now you can find these 2018 and newer models. You know, some of these 2018s are just coming off lease. That's how we got this car. Again, we bought it used. It had, you know, under 18,000 miles on it, and it was less than $25,000 even after taxes. So comparing this to a new model that costs almost $40,000, I think that's the way to go. And that's kind of the way I'm looking at EVs kind of going forward, is really to look at the used market. And that, to me, especially if you're new to electric vehicles, is a way to maybe get into it without spending a whole lot of money. If money is no consequence, then sure, go for the brand new thing. Go buy a RAV4 Prime. It'll be a better car. But so far, I've been impressed with the Outlander PHEV. I really do like finally having an SUV that I feel like, you know, is efficient simply because of the plug-in technology associated with it. So I'm about to be at my final stop, picking up my daughter and then heading home. So thank you so much for being patient. This turned out to be a longer video than I expected, but hopefully you got a lot of useful information and feel like you have a good idea of how the Outlander works and if it would work for you as a plug-in electric vehicle. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next episode.